I want to introduce our guests here. And I'm going to start with the people who are relatively new to our discussion group. And we'll start with Marcia Eckert. And she's a practicing clinical psychologist since 1985, specializing in Asperger's syndrome. She writes about detection and diagnosis of ASD in females, autism spectrum disorder in females. And she was part of a Yale Norwalk Hospital Pediatric Therapy Center. So that's part of what she does. And VR Feroz, I think we're just going to call you Feroz.
Yes, thank you.
And you may have to help me with pronouncing one of these words here. The chair on the board of the Specialistern.
Yeah.
Specialistern USA.
It's a Danish word for specialist.
Ah, okay. Well, it's a non-profit organization, and your goal is very interesting. I never heard anybody doing it. To create 1 million jobs for people with autism.
Yeah, all neurodiverse, yeah.
And so that's pretty good. And you mentioned that to me when we met a year and a half ago. And then he's the founder of the India Autism Inclusion Foundation, again, not profit. And his aim is to bring the topic of inclusion to the forefront in India. I just have a feeling you might be the only one doing this. You know what I mean? It's like your thing. It's not like you have 20 people trying to do the same thing. So it's huge. And he's also the senior vice president and head of SAP Engineering Academy, SAP Engineering. I think most people have heard of that. So that's Feroz. And thank you for raising your hand. Professor Stephen Shaw.
Yeah, here I am.
He has Asperger's himself. He's not ashamed of that. Proud of it, in fact. In fact, I feel a little left out. And he's a professor at Adelphi University and wrote Autism for Dummies and Beyond the Wall. And we're going to be referring to that book today, the Autism for Dummies book. And Wen Lawson, I was telling Wen earlier, he's about everything. I mean, he's a psychologist, he's a researcher, he's an advocate, he's a writer, he's an autistic lecturer. And he's written over 20 books. And now you can help me with this one, Wen. It says on your site, you're currently working on a new book on intersectionality, neurodiversity, and gender diversity. So that book hasn't come out yet?
No, due out March next year.
Next year, okay. So we're looking forward to that. And I'm Rob Bernstein. I have over 30 years of in-depth experience working with a wide range of clients on the spectrum. And I wrote this award-winning book, Uniquely Normal, Tapping the Reservoir of Normalcy to Treat Autism. And the forward was by Temple Grandin. And I thought of that because Feroz has Temple Grandin's picture on his wall. So let's start with the first question about neurodiversity. We have to define it. And it's not so easy. I'll tell you why. Because I think Marsha had the same experience. You talk to a physician about neurodiversity, you know what they say? What? I don't know, what, right? So Marsha, why don't you start us off in how you could define it, or in a simple way, in a sentence or two. How would you define it?
Because one of the reasons that I
defining neurodiversity.
That's what I'm getting to. Okay. One of the reasons why I took to writing professional journal articles, which are a total pain in the rear to write, is that I think most of the people in the, even in the psychological or mental health community in this country, much less anyone else, don't know what neurodiversity is. I was doing a talk on this and a recent PhD said, well, what's that? And they weren't even training people in that in terms of current.
So how would you define it? Give us a
I would say that it's that it's a really different model that says that it's normal for people's brains to be wired differently. And I kind of use it, this is a crazy example, but I have brown hair, and there are people who have blonde hair, and there are people who have red hair. And we don't say, well, someone with red hair is a broken brown-haired person. I mean, we have an idea when it comes to how, you know, neurodevelopmental pathways, that there is a right way and every other way is the wrong way. And this is an alternative theory to that, which says there are legitimate alternatives that have their strengths, they have their challenges, and
So-
that they're all legitimate.
I mean, anyone could jump in on this, but I just want to give, I just want to read this dictionary definition of it. The range of differences in individual brain function and behavioral traits are regarded as part of the normal variation.
Right,
So differences are differences, and they're within the normal variation.
right,
As opposed to
pathology.
Finish this, as opposed to pathology. This is a something we're going to call some kind of a disorder and fix it, or disease and fix it. So I just need to get the idea. Now, one of the questions that were given to me was the difference between neurodiversity and neurodivergent. So I'm going to ask Wen to step in here, and neurodiversity and neurodivergent, because people, you know, again, it's an extension of what we're talking about, to be clear. Go ahead. What would you say about that?
When I think of the term neurodiversity, I think of inclusion. I think of the diversity of everybody's brain and thinking styles, etc. The term neurodivergent just means we diverge from and away from the typical. So a lot of autistic people would think of themselves as neurodivergent and part of being, or of the neurodiversity movement, if you like. So they are literally, one diverges from the typical, from the usual, and diversity or neurodiversity encompasses all.
All right. And how about the idea also that neurodiversity, as Judy Singer said, who coined the term in 1998, it's an approach. It's a way we look at normalcy, as opposed to, and you could give me your opinion on this, neurodivergent can mean epilepsy. You know, it can mean anything that isn't.
It's a divergent or a movement away
Right.
from what is thought of as usual. But the neurodiversity complexity of that model just says that we're all part of neurodiversity.
So, all right. Does anyone else want to chime in on that, or?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
You know, when I think about neurodiversity, and this was partially suggested before, really what we're just looking at is an expression of the diversity of the human gene pool.
Yeah.
And that there are many ways of being, and being autistic is just a different way of being. It's a diverse way of being. It's not necessarily a disordered way of being. That said, there are certainly a number of things about autism that can be terribly disordering. And some of that is caused just by societal expectations. And some of it is just real, frank disability. There are disabilities that can come with being autistic, but that can come, disabilities can also come to people who have other conditions and people who are, for lack of better terminology, non-autistic or neurotypical. It's possible to have a disability as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Well, I think in that sense that you get into what is neurotypical, because you could say neurotypical is just one of many neurodiversities. You know, sort of neurotypical are the people who define themselves as normal. wouldn't you say?
That's commonly thought of that way, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I suppose what we're about in general is wanting to redefine normal,
Exactly.
push that out to encompass a more diverse population, or as or more diverse humanity, really. Because by saying somebody is normal and somebody is not, this is, I think that is unethical, to be honest. I think it's really, it's very, very uncomfortable. And when our kids, I've got, my wife's autistic, and we've got 3 autistic offspring and 3 autistic grandchildren. And I mean, it's awful to think that one of our kids or each other would consider us as we're not normal. And I hear young people, young autistic people saying, if only I could be normal, or if I was normal, I wouldn't have this problem if, and that's wrong thinking, unhelpful thinking, because it doesn't help build confidence, self-esteem, or deal with any of the issues that as humans we battle daily, all of us, wherever we sit in the genome or in that diversity of thinking. It doesn't matter where we sit, we will battle things to do with self and other, and we need to start with liking who we are. And one autistic friend,
I love what you said, Gwen, about
she'd take it.
I'm sorry. No,
Sorry, I'm
don't-
that. Yeah.
I just love what you said about redefining normal. And we all know what I'm going to say, that normal is a dirty word now. Everyone uses typical. You can't use the word normal. But the way you phrase redefining normal, that could be a title of a book. And I
think it is.
Yeah. And I use the word normal twice in the cover of my book. So it's like I'm sort of, yeah, let's bring it up again and let's talk about it. For Rose, the way you, I mean, you're bringing the Indian culture here as well as the American culture. Is there, you know, what does neurodiversity mean to, you know, your business or your,
Sure.
or your community? How does that work there?
So, you know, everything that you said was very interesting for me, because I see the world, or at least when you're coming from India, you see the world very differently. In fact, one of the very interesting things that happen, especially if you're in India, is people don't label. They don't like to label people, which actually has both advantages and disadvantages. Yeah. And I say that if I have to compare the East and the West, the biggest difference is the East is a interdependent community. It's an interdependency is a state of mind. Whereas in the West, independence is the most important thing, right? So one is a very independent society, other is an interdependent society. And it's very interesting that when you're living in an interdependent society, people just believe everybody is different and unique. So there is no labeling. So actually, it's funny that people, I have grown up with sometimes people being different, and it is very important that as you don't label them, they become part of you. It's a very fascinating way to see that sometimes labeling puts people into boxes, right? And families have always had, you know, you call it disabled, you call it autistic. It does, and the fact is, as soon as you don't label anybody, they are part of you.
Right.
There is no difference. And so because we have lived in family structures where, you know, 2-3 generations live together, if you have 15 people in a house, everybody is different. So why label, right? So I also see that overcomplicating it by putting so many different labels actually sometimes brackets you into silos, which is not very healthy. But also I see the positives of it, that of course, if you have a unique challenge, then you know how to deal with it, right? So I think we have to be extremely careful not to overdo it, because as soon as you overdo it, it becomes too complex. Like exactly you said, if we can't define what neurodiversity is, how do you expect the regular people to even understand it? They're like, this is too complex. You know, in India, for example, and I'm sure it happened in the rest of US, there was huge debates about, should I call people with disability? Could I call specially abled? Could I call differently abled? And I always say, this is all bullshit. I mean, we are wasting time on things rather than really solving the problem. There's no point. I kind of run away from panel discussions where they are like 10 people debating what should I call it, specially abled, people with disability, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter. If you
Right.
are truly inclusive, it doesn't matter. You can call whatever you want. So I think from an academic point, it's very important, but you also have to remember, if you make it extremely complex, people just don't relate to it, right? You have to make it extremely simple so that everybody understands it. I mean, that's my take. Forgive me if I'm kind of
No, it's
going,
perfect.
giving a contrary point of view. I'm just coming from a very different culture
No,
which sees it very differently.
no, it's not at all contrary. And the idea of a label could do harm, actually, because now you have a label. What do you
Yeah,
do about X, ADHD, whatever? And now
yeah,
you have a formula, a
yeah,
cookie cutter approach to that label.
absolutely.
And the fundamental part of who a person is gone. It's perfect thing that I wanted to quote from Wen's book. He talks about this older woman. She was not coping with the domestics of running a home. So the system accommodated her and say, you can get another person in your home for 2 hours twice a week. 2 hours or twice a week. That seems reasonable. But just because of what you're saying, Feroz, that you're missing the soul and the heart and soul of that person, she says this person, she was afraid that this person would not understand her autism.
Yeah.
So the fear prevented her from seeking help. Now, what does the system do about that? Sorry.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
You know, Rob, I'll give you one fascinating conversation that I was part of. And, everybody was talking about what's the future of autism? What do we do? And then this guy came and said, you know what? I think I found the holy grail of how to deal with autism. And I'm like, so what is that? They say it's interdependent, it's multi-generational living. And I'm like, okay, what is that? He says, no, what if 3 generations live together? Then everybody is a support system of each other. And then you don't have to extensively rely on social support and all that. And I'm like, but that's what countries like India has been doing for millions of years. And so I'm like, what is it? I mean, and I absolutely get it. And I'm saying this because, for example, my in-laws live with me. And a lot of people are like, huh, why does your in-laws live with you? But I can tell you, it's so important for my 11-year-old son who's on the spectrum and nonverbal to have a holistic family environment. The reason I am able to work and my wife is able to work is also because I have great family support. These are things that I absolutely take it for granted, right?
Yeah,
But when I come to the West, obviously it's seen as sometimes, how does that work, right?
yeah, that's good. That's interesting. So you're saying that's a good thing to
I
have that
see it to
family
be,
structure.
yeah, as long as you can live with your in-laws and not fight with them all the time, it's a good thing. No, I
So,
absolutely believe it's a good thing. Absolutely. Jokes
uh,
apart.
Rob, I want to bring something up though that's interesting though, and since I wrote this article on women, or I've been writing a lot about women, because so often girls and women are misunderstood and mislabeled in school in terms of being, especially given all the societal notions of what a girl should be. She should be nice, she should be eager to please, she should be all these things. And what I found since I wrote these things is I've got women from all over the country contacting me because they want a diagnosis. And I'm on the board of a wonderful autistic nonprofit called Neuroclastic. And I see in the Facebook groups that there's a lot of women who talk about this. And the 2 women I most recently spoke with, they wanted a label because they wanted to be able to let go of the shame and let go of the guilt they felt, and this notion that they would be different if they just tried harder.
I think you're making a really good point that people will go through, and I think Wen could talk about this, either good or for or against, that people will go through their life and in their 40s and their 50s. And once they understand, wow, I have Asperger's, then, and Steve talked about this once, then, okay, now I could live my life and understand certain things about myself and go on with doing things, you know, for that issue once I know what it is. But anyway, I want to go on to this other question. Thanks, Marcia, for that. Is looking at the school's culture. And as I'm preparing for this, I'm wondering if school's culture, a school environment, and it's not only elementary school, it could be in colleges. How does the school culture influence, you know, neurodiversity? What's the relationship? And I see nobody's jumping to this, but I want to quote what Steve wrote in his book, Autism for Dummies. And now you could tell me what you think of this. I think it's brilliant, but that's only my opinion. Even Steve doesn't think it's brilliant. Steve talks about in a classroom, there's a quiet time area. And he said that the teacher should expect a child sitting in this area for a break from overstimulation to do his work. Now let's just think about that for a minute. I mean, I've been to what, hundreds of classrooms? I've been doing this for 35 years. Quiet time, what does quiet time mean? That means if a kid feels overwhelmed, what do you say to the kid? Go out, go to a quiet space, go outside the room, go sit in the principal's office, and when you're ready, come back. When you're ready, come back and join us because we're the standard. We're the standard. So the kid feels, what is wrong with me that I have to leave? And when maybe I don't want to come back because when I come back, I just feel all this anxiety. Maybe the quiet time is where he functions best. And if the teacher says the idea, and this is what I think it's brilliant about it, go to that quiet time area, not to take a break and then come back to our standard, as if you're a saltwater fish and you come back to freshwater and now you're in trouble, right? That idea. Go to the quiet time area and function well. Be there. Embrace that. You're different, but everyone's different. Maybe after a few weeks, somebody else will join you in your quiet time area. Now, this is the point I want to make, and I'm thinking of when, not even Steve. Steve could comment on this too, because it's his quote. But I'm thinking of when, that here are kids, they're developing. Instead of a kid feeling, what's wrong with me? I take a break, I come back, and I'm still anxious. For a kid to say, wait, the way I learn best, the way I function best is that I need a quiet space. Why does the kid have to wait till he's 10, 20, 30 years old to realize who he is and how he works best? Why can't he learn that when he's 6 years old? That, oh, it's okay. That's how I learn. And have the teacher teach this child, how he learns best and functions best. So, go ahead.
Rob, Rob, we're talking about changing the whole education system here, because it's the system that is at fault. It's not the kids, it's not how teachers teach. It's what's expected of a school to deliver on curriculum in a particular way, and they're under incredible pressure to do that. So until you change the system, you've got individual teachers already doing exactly what you're saying. They're out there, they're doing this, and they're helping kids discover who they are and how best they operate and learn. But until the system changes, it can't be a universal kind of thing, because at least in Western culture, this is how schools operate.
Steve, you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I do.
It's your quote.
Well, one thing that comes to mind that would be helpful for education is to think about universal design. When designing the environment, when designing curriculum, because the more ways that we can provide for students to take information in, then to process it, and then to demonstrate that they've mastered the material, better off we'll be. And that will work much better than what most people do, and that is retrofit curriculum that tends to be narrowly defined to usually the middle third of the class.
Yeah.
So then it will make it more interesting for everybody else as well.
Yep.
So it increases accessibility and it makes it more interesting for everybody. And in that way, more people can be working from the same curriculum.
Yeah. Maybe Rob, if I can weigh in from my own
Yep, I was
experience
going to
with
ask you.
if my son is now 11 years old, nonverbal, on the spectrum. He's just in 6th grade. And let me share my own experience. And I must confess that I moved from India to US so that he gets into an education system. In India, he would not, there is no schools that could have handled him. So I'm extremely grateful for the services that this country provides. And I can tell you it's still way ahead of many parts of the world. So it works fantastically, but I still believe there are areas of improvement. One of the things that I found with my son is that he's in the 6th grade, but his school that he goes to treats him like a 1st grade student. So we did a independent private, test about his cognitive abilities and so on. And he's off the charts. He's 6th, 7th standard cognitive ability, maths and science and English and so on. But his school treats him like is like a 1st grade because of him being nonverbal. And where I think we should do is the schools should presume competence first, assume competence instead of assuming incompetence, right? It's a flip, but if you assume competence,
Yeah.
you really don't run the risk of treating somebody as dumb when he's not, right? And I think that's a fundamental shift that schools have to make. And like you said, when it's really not the schools or the teachers. I think they are all well-meaning. They are very hardworking. They do the best. But I think we have created systems which are completely outdated. The public school system is pretty much a government-run bureaucratic organization, unlike private organizations which are far ahead of everybody else and they're innovating. School education systems, there is no innovation. They're still like 10 years behind. And even if they have to change something, it's going to take you 5 to 10 years. So there is no way they can catch up with all the innovations that are happening. So you can't blame the teachers. It's actually the system that is pretty, it takes years to change that system. And
And
nobody is incentivized to change the system, actually. That's the problem. There's no incentive to change.
that's interesting. I think the reason why people do not look at the challenge of the child and they start down below is exactly what I went to a pretty good graduate school, but what I learned, start low and then work your way up. And I totally disagree with that because they say it's bad for the self-esteem. So somebody has to prove to me that if you start with something, let's say the kid has no idea of, let's say you're teaching this kid Hindi and he has no clue, right? Is that bad for this kid's self-esteem? He just doesn't get it.
Yeah.
That's the philosophy behind it. Let's start low and let's go up. I'm saying start high and work your way down.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely agree.
So Marsha, did you want to weigh in on that?
Well, I was going to say that, kids aren't, in my experience, kids aren't low or high. They have all kinds of different levels of aptitudes and different things. And one of the things that I see that's most troubling is I see kids kind of treated at the level of their lowest common denominator. So if you're really weak in writing, everything goes down, as opposed to recognizing children for their strengths and then giving them some help in the areas they need help.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I want to mention one thing that I want to come back to, exactly what Wen said in the beginning. We need a systematic change in everything, with the schools and so forth. And that's where I want to go with neurodiversity, that I see it as a movement. That I feel really kind of passionate about this, and other people probably feel much more than I do. That it's an attitude, it's a systematic change that we may be looking for through this idea of neurodiversity. But I just want to, before that, I just want to talk about if Wen or Steve in particular have a personal story that you went through, maybe as a kid, maybe as an adult, where you were young, like the stories that we're telling, that you wish that why did it take me so long to understand who I was? The teacher could have done this. Are there any personal stories that you could share to illustrate how something happened that was great in terms of neuro, or that you had to suffer through?
You go first, Steve.
Oh, well, I'm trying to think of an example because there's so many of them. So it's hard to choose the one, whether it was having difficulty in math and being told that I would never learn how to do math, but at the same time, I had a stack of astronomy books on my desk that I was busy taking notes and copying diagrams of. And the question, if the teacher would only do, the answer to that is have enough awareness to note this highly focused interest, which is very mathematical in nature, and find a way to teach mathematics through this particular interest. So that's an example of school. Later on, in a work situation, I was very friendly with the dean of business, and this was in a previous life when I was a music professor. And he and I would talk about this and that, and we came up with the idea of setting up a music business major, which would have been really cool. He liked the idea, I liked the idea, and we talked about it some more. And so I said, okay, do you want to do it? Let's propose it for next semester. And he told me that he was too busy with things now, but we could look at it maybe next semester and then do it beyond. And it seemed like he was telling the truth. He wasn't just putting me off. So that was all good. Well, then it came time to write up a report as to what I was doing. Like you always have to do it at college. You have to say what you did for the past year, and you notate it all. So I recounted my great discussions with the business dean and how he was not ready right now because he had too many things to do. And as a result, maybe we could do it next semester or next year. And it seemed to be a pretty innocuous thing to write. However, that did find its way out up to the vice president, who then gave the business dean a good yelling at because he wasn't working hard enough. And then the business dean got mad at me because somebody yelled at him and accused me of making it look like that he's lazy. So these subtle office politic type things that us autistic people often
Now here's a personal question, if you don't mind.
Oh, go for it.
This is something that I would do. I mean, I have done stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So looking back at it, does that have anything to do with Asperger's, that you were just being honest and open and honest and direct?
It's hard to say. I think, maybe what was missing and what I am now aware of the hard way is that anything you write, especially in a work situation, consider it public and also consider possible negative ramifications for somebody else in the process as you're writing things.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's an Aspergerish thing that caused it, or if it was or what it was.
So Wen, do you want to
yes,
chime in?
I think it's also being literal, Steve. You believed the literal presentation that you were offered, and
Right.
because there's no guile in that, you were able to record it as was, and other people can have a problem with that. For me, I was told, I didn't talk till closer to my 5th birthday. I was in diapers, nappies till a similar age, and I was not expected to learn, and I was kept way down in special school classes, and I was always told I was a dunce and couldn't achieve. And it took one teacher who saw me differently and took time just to sit and go over stories with me and help me build connections. I'll never forget her taking that time, because when a light went on for me, it went on and it continued to grow. So I finished year 11 and 12 when I was 38 and 39 years old. And I got into uni, not at 18, but at 40.
What, you
So
mean,
everything
you mean
in my
grade,
life was
I'm sorry,
made.
grade 11 and 12? You said year
Yes.
11 and grade 11
Okay.
and 12. Okay,
Yeah, the last 2 years of high school, we call it in Australia.
right, I understand.
Yeah. So
Wow,
everything
you're 30.
delayed, but had I can't help but wonder, similar, Steve, if someone had focused on my strengths and what I was able to do and used that as a means to help me do things that I couldn't do, I think I would have got there a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So if I don't have an interest in something, I find it very hard to connect to anything else. But using that interest as a bit of a bridge is the way that I connect to an understanding. And I'm dyslexic, I'm dyspraxic, I'm ADHD, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So my head is in, my thinking is constantly on the go and in various other places once. Bringing those things together and enabling me, I would have, I believe, achieved in my life a better sense of self at an earlier age than I had done, because no one expected of me. Nobody thought I could do anything. And when I did qualify as a psychologist, at least toward the end of that, the having to practice, I had to apply for agencies to go and practice as a probationary psychologist.
You've stopped. Has anyone seen that as well?
No,
Yeah,
when it
I
goes
think,
up.
yeah,
All right, there's
I
just a
think he's
pause.
frozen.
Yeah.
So we just wait.
Well, I'll fill in until Wen can come back.
Okay, good.
And back what might have been Marsha who said it, was to presume competence. And we need to turn the conversation
That was
away
Feroz.
from, I froze too?
That was Feroz who was talking about
Oh, it's Feroz. Okay, Feroz is the
that
guilty
his
party.
kid is so bright, but they look at him in the lowest denominator.
Yeah, I was the denominator.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So turning away from a deficit model of autism and towards an ability-based model, and asking the question, what can the autistic person do?
Yeah.
And then working from there.
Yeah.
And viewing those challenges, which are real and they can be significant, because if they weren't, we wouldn't be here trying to figure it out. But looking at them as barriers that need to be torn down so that the person can be successful in communicating or mathematics or whatever the situation might be.
yeah.
So far, to keep the conversation going until Wen arrives again, we have this interest-based model and ability-based model, which is very interesting to me.
You said
Because-
interest-based? What is that?
What you just said, that look at the kid's ability rather than what he can't do. Let's look at what the kid can do.
Okay, so what was the term? Because it's by the time it made its way over to here, it sounded like interspace, like interstellar space.
Well, I said ability-based, which is what you just said.
Right.
And what we had said earlier is see what the interest of the kid is.
Oh,
Involve that.
interest-based. Oh,
I
okay.
said interest-based and ability-based.
All right, some of the consonants didn't make it through.
But what's interesting to me, and this could be very controversial, and I'd be curious to hear what Feroz says about this, because he's in tune with this, is that both of those things, ability and interest, is from the kid's point of view.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you think about this. The other side of that is what's been traditional education all this time, and I call it curriculum-based. What does curriculum mean? I know I have a list of what you need to learn, and I'm going to teach you this, this, and this. It's my curriculum that you have to learn. To me, that's opposing, and to some extent, oh, what are you interested in? What's your ability? You know, it's a different kind of way of thinking of things.
Well, I just like to piggyback on that because here in Connecticut, there's something in the Department of Education standards that talks about teaching to children based on their best way of learning and interests. But that has absolutely nothing to do with what goes on in schools, and there's no teeth, or there's nothing to make people do that. In fact, what happens is there's a Common Core curriculum that has to be taught in a particular way. So if the particular thing is you have to write a first-person narrative essay, that's it. And the idea of someone learning in their own way based on their own interests or anything like that is just completely off the table. At least around here. How about other places?
So maybe I'll give you two or three insights into this. So I run now the SAP Academy for Engineering, which is the learning organization within SAP. So I got into this from a pure engineering role to a learning organization, and I had no understanding of it. So I spent the last 1.5 years trying to understand how does learning function, and it was pretty clear to me that learning is actually the graveyard of all projects, because almost every person who's involved with learning eventually fails, because it's the reason is it's incredibly complex, right? So while I understand things are not perfect and not the way it should be, but I also should say it's incredibly complex. And one of my core insights here is learning has to be what I call as precision learning, which means it is personalized learning, because every kid, every adult learns very differently, right? But our schools are structured in a way where everybody gets the same education, everybody gets the same curriculum, but that's just not true. You learn differently, I learn differently, everybody has different pace of learning, different interests, different abilities. And that's where I come to the whole idea called precision learning, which is something like precision medicine, which means the medicine that you eat has to be specific to your body structure, to your history, to the challenges that you've had. And we've got to a point where today we can have personalized medicine. And I think the same is required for learning as well, where it's extremely personalized and extremely precision driven, which means there is enough data to tell you this is the best way a person could learn, and this is how I would help. And I think technology can make that possible, and I'm pretty sure that maybe in the next decade or so, this will actually become a reality, which means you don't have to have one curriculum for everybody in a classroom, but you can have different journeys for different individual based on his or her ability to learn.
Wow. Yeah. So that's an example where the medical model really does work in terms of
Yes.
individualized, specific, but the goals have to make sense. In other words, if the goal is like a kid that I just saw in India, their goal was, there's a kid who can't really talk and have a back and forth conversation and says almost nothing. What tell me the day that comes before Wednesday.
Yeah.
Right? If that's the goal, and then you do this medical model thing, and if that's your criteria for success, as opposed to have the kid tell you when they're hurt, then your value system may be off. We have to have that value system first of what we think is meaningful, in my view, meaningful and quote good education.
So the simplest way to explain that, I always say, is assuming you want to go to the airport from your home, right? So you book an Uber, and Uber comes and takes you to the airport. Now the way you should remember is it should not matter which route you take. I can go from one route, the other person can go from the other route. Somebody can reach 10 minutes earlier, somebody can reach 10 minutes later. As long as you reach the destination, it doesn't matter which route you take. So the teacher's objective is to ensure that the person reaches the destination, but you can take any route you want. You can take as long as you want. Like, just now Wen said that he did his 12th standard at the age of 40. And that's great. Why not? I mean, that's okay too, right? So the problem is today we say every student has to reach the destination at the same day. He has to finish the curriculum on the same, and everybody has to study the same curriculum. They have to give the same exam. And that's just not relevant because human beings learn differently. I learn differently, you, Rob, will learn differently, my son learns differently, but everybody has to take the same path. How stupid is that?
Last exchange with this, because I want other people to come in, but I think this is an important point. This is an important point. The question is, and this is what I do in with my life, really. The question is, how does that kid learn? It's not up to the kid. That has to be up to the teacher to understand how that kid learns. It takes me about 40 hours often of thinking and figuring out to understand how that kid's mind works. You know what I mean? That's where the whole skill comes in terms of my whole practice. So I know this firsthand.
Yeah.
You're right. But now you have to understand how each individual kid learns. And we talk about an individualized education program. That's what it really means. Right?
Exactly.
It's not meaning,
Exactly.
oh, so that's the trick to what you're saying. If we could do both of those,
yeah,
then you have a miraculous situation.
Yeah, it's a balancing act is what it is.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Again, I mean, the way, I don't want to hijack the discussion. This is obviously we can spend 2 hours or even 2 days discussing and debating that, but I will kind of pause and listen to other people's point of view as well. So
I want to
I'm
go
happy to, yeah.
I want to go on to another important topic. And if Steve, I'm trying to look for Wen's number to give him a call. I don't have his number handy. I gave him another invitation, but something's going on with him. Maybe we could tell him to use a different device to get on. But I want to go on to something that I think is brewing in the back of my mind, is that this neurodiversity kind of paradigm, is this against like the medical paradigm that says, no, 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 it's not just difference. It really is a pathological issue, and we have to look at it as a disease base. And maybe if we all do this again, I'll invite a physician. I tried for this time, and it's very hard to get through to somebody who can represent the medical paradigm, because there's something of value there too. So what do you think about that? The neurodiversity and the medical paradigm, and if maybe they work together. I don't know, but that's my question. Are they really kind of opposed to each other? And oh, good. Go ahead, Steve.
So when I think about the medical paradigm hunts for problems and things that are broken. And in medical situations, like if you have a broken heart valve or a broken disc in your back or a broken bone, you really do have to go fix it. You don't say, well, this is a diverse presentation of the bone structure or the heart structure, and we're going to respect it for what it is because there may be some value to this difference. Whereas the neurodiversity model just looks at differences as they are without value, or at least I do anyways. They're not good, they're not bad, they just exist. And then the question is, what good can we make from this difference? So that's what I see about differences between the two. And can they work together? Well, sure, if a difference is causing problems for the autistic person. So let's say one of those differences is lack of ability to communicate. So that's something we got to fix. We do have to fix that. However, we can be diverse in how we address the issue. And for many autistic people, talking like we're talking now is just not going to work due to neurological differences. So the beauty of neurodiversity is we can think, is there another way that the autistic person can communicate. And I know many autistic people who communicate by pointing at pictures, typing on a keyboard, and various alternate ways of communicating. And once we figure out that reliable means of communication, then often we find that that person's just as smart as the rest of us, maybe smarter.
And this relates to Marion. I remember Tony Atwood responded to that and saying, even through music or even through art,
Sure.
you can communicate and relate. So, yeah. Now, I want to bring up something, unless somebody has a burning thing to say about the medical versus, I think you laid it out really nicely. I just want to go on here, Marcia, only because, hold on, I have a special guest I want to bring in. I just want to get to this guy. So, you know, we could go back to it, but I just want to make sure I go forward with this for a second. Here's part of the core of what I want to bring out in this little seminar, that would you say there's a neurodiversity movement? You know, is there a paradigm shift? That's what I'm looking for. I began, before inclusion was a word used, I began in the early 70s, a visiting program between cerebral palsy kids and typical, you know, kids in another school. I called it a visiting program. Inclusion wasn't even a word then. That was good for the individual kids. That was good for those kids, those families. But I'm talking about, and I think we're bringing it out now, systematic change. Could we have a movement that really changes the system? And when I say systematic change, we know what all comes to mind. Simon Baron-Cohen, we were talking to Feroz earlier, the notion of neurodiversity is very compatible with, you know what I'm going to say, the civil rights pleas for minorities. Now this might be a big jump, but here he says that. The civil rights pleas for minorities to be accorded dignity and acceptance. So with that, I'm gonna see if I can get Bob Smith to come on. I don't know if his picture's gonna come on or just his voice, but Bob is here. Now let's see, I'm gonna ask you to unmute, Bob.
Hi, am I unmuted?
So did you hear that last, and everybody could participate. What do you think of the idea? What could we learn? Let's put it this way. From the, look, I was part of the Vietnam War movement, and we all have been part of movements. You were there, Bob. You marched with Martin Luther King in Selma. You're John Lewis's protege. You were arrested 14 times. You had a gun pointing to your head. You're part of this movement. What could you add to this conversation that we can learn from looking at this neurodiversity movement, which is recent? We said, Marcia said earlier, there are people who never even heard the word neurodiversity. What could you tell us to help us along in this movement?
Am I being heard now?
You're being heard, not seen, but heard. That's fine.
Okay. I would say that one thing that would be most helpful is, and I see you folks being there together, is to be together. We talk about change. And Dr. Lawson and Miss Ella Baker were some of our change advocates. You don't even know those names, but they were the people who were there, who were telling us young folk how we needed to behave in that civil rights movement, to be nonviolent. They were there for that. Fannie Lou Hamer was there for that. She talked about the fact that she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Now people hear that all of the time, but that came from Mrs. Hamer. Dr. King was a very good tactician, if that's the word. He planned stuff. He's playing strategy. We went to Selma to protest Jimmy Lee Jackson being killed, and it turned out to be a movement to get voter registration on the ballot so that we could all be registered to vote as citizens of this country. I would say that the thing is for that I see here, and as I've heard you folk talk, is to remain together. You're gonna have different voices, but you have a common goal, and that goal is to well, you have a common goal. One of the pieces that's important to me is to have the families being active and supporting their children or their adults. That's an important piece.
I missed
And
that word. Did you say families active?
to have the families, have the mothers, the fathers, the grandparents being active in supporting what's going on to get the services. Because the school system is not that interested in providing those services because it costs money. Oftentimes what they do, and I had kind of written that as one of my questions, oftentimes what they do is they send those people to jail, to reform school. They try not to provide the services that's needed. One example I have is that a young woman, black woman, called the police because her boyfriend was breaking a window, let's say. And when the police left, so did the young man. But he left in a body bag. He was dead. So you ask us to trust the police. So I'm saying to you, why should the community, your community, trust the school system to provide services when they're not really about wanting to do that? They're about
Wow.
provide service to what they call normal kids.
So I'm going to ask Feroz first to, if you have any comment or impression or question, or, you know, what do you think about that? Bob talked about 4 or 5 different things.
No, absolutely. I mean, I've been studying social movements for almost 2 decades, and it started with Gandhi's Salt March. And I was trying to study how did Gandhi manage to mobilize a whole nation of 350 million people towards a common cause when there was, no social media, nothing, right? I mean, how did he mobilize everybody? And it's the same thing that happened with the civil rights movement. It's the same thing that happened with the Women's March. And there were a few fundamental commonalities, and I'll try, because what I'm trying to do in India is also to build a social movement, because India is it's a small country with 1.3 billion people. So if you have to reach 1.3 billion people, how do you mobilize everybody towards a common cause? And I think Bob had said this so perfectly. The first problem that I realized is that the entire disability community, and I'm using the word disability because it's not just autism, but every other section, they have a scarcity mindset. A scarcity mindset is, I will be successful only if somebody else fails, right? And I've had long discussions with Senator Harkin, and he told me how the ADA was actually framed. He said, Feroz, when I was trying to pass the American Disabilities Act, you could have so many the biggest conflict was within the disability community itself. So it's the blind community, the hearing impaired, the visually impaired, the autism, all of them wanted their piece of the cake. And then he said, the only thing I did was I put them into a room and I said, I'm going to come back in 1 hour. If you don't guys come together, this is off the table. And then they came together. And this is exactly what Bob Smith said right now. You have to be together. This is not about, if the autism community will win only if the cerebral palsy community loses or the blind community loses. And unfortunately, this is not I'm not talking about US or India. Everywhere around the world, I found that they have a scarcity mindset. But if you actually do it the other way around and say, if all of us are together, all of us will be successful. I think it's easy to say, but I can tell you it's incredibly hard. So that's clearly the most important aspect. Yeah.
Why I asked Bob to come in here in the first place was I saw him protest in front of his local court with the Black Lives Matter movement. He was the only one there with his sign and all that. And he was interviewed on local radio. And he said something I haven't heard anywhere with this Black Lives movement. They said, why are you here, Bob? And he says, I'm protesting against the Black Lives movement and all the other minorities and oppressed people like women and people with disabilities. And it's like, wow, he's the only one, at least I've heard, that brought just what you're saying, Feroz. He's saying, why don't we all come together?
Yeah.
We all are, you know, oppressed or missing out or being unnoticed. So that's so powerful.
So I'll tell you, because if and that's why I have personally looked at myself as fighting for all disabilities, even though, you know, everybody knows me as the one who started the autism at work. I said, if it's only autism, that's 1% of the population. But if it's all disabilities, then you're already 15% of the population, and you need numbers for this. A movement cannot happen with very small numbers. How do you expand it? Get everybody in. That's it. So it is not about autism, it's not about cerebral palsy, it's not about VI, it's not about H, it's all minorities. I say anybody who is marginalized, we have to fight for them.
I would agree. One of the things about Dr. King.
Put your camera forward, your computer forward to see your whole face.
Yeah.
I can't see your chin. That's it.
Yeah.
I don't know how to. One of the things about Dr. King is that he was a person who would listen, and he would formulate what other folk in the groups were saying together, and then we'd have come out with a plan. I didn't know when we went to Selma that we were going to march I knew we were going to march from Selma to Montgomery, but I had no idea that we were going to change and have a Voters' Rights Act. Martin looked at what was going on, and that was part of it. So you had people like John Lewis, Stokely Carmichael, NAACP, CORE, all these organizations, and they were different organizations, but we worked together to make a change. And that's really what Farouk is talking about. We worked together to make a change.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Martin had that vision.
Yes, he did.
So what you're saying, and maybe what Feroz is saying, that we need maybe somebody with that kind of vision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, you know, you have to have somebody who sees the big picture, who ties all of the smaller parts together. And that's clearly the visionary's role, you know, get everybody together. Otherwise, everybody has just their personal agenda, and that doesn't move the needle.
When I marched in Washington against the Vietnam War, we had music. I don't know if this has anything to do. We had John Lennon sing "Give Peace a Chance" on the Mall of Washington when the peace sign actually meant something. We had these people through their music and leadership, you know, that embraced, that touched everybody. So I'm not sure of the way to do that. Is it going to be a leader to galvanize people? We don't have a song. We don't have a Bob Dylan. You know, Bob Dylan was asked to lead this movement that we're talking about. And you know what Bob Dylan said? I already had my fight. I had my fight in the 60s. You know, somebody has to pick that up. So the question of how is, or who is an important one. Steve, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I certainly do. And that is whether it's groups of you know, different disability categories or any categories at all, or whether it's in my university, I always feel that we can do so much more by working together than any one of us can do alone.
I find that there's a lot of resistance to this, though, that, you know, everybody has their turf staked out. And we've got one crossover going on right now. I'm very involved in some cases that are hashtag Black Autistic Lives Matter or Black Disabled Lives Matter, because there are many people who are Black and something else. And in this case, we're talking about some Black autistic teenagers who ran into the you know, the prejudices and the systemic kinds of things in the court system. But, you know, I totally agree. But what I find is that you've got the people where this is their issue, and you know, it's a challenge to bring people together. No,
I let me tell you, with that, I mean, I've been studying as to why disability has not become a movement in India, right? And there are two fundamental reasons for that. And this is again across all social movements. Every social movement, they say you need to either have a common enemy or collective pride. Okay. So if you ask, why did 1 million people walk when Trump was elected the next day? We had the largest march of people around the world. It's the largest single day march around the world. And you may ask, how did so many million people just walk? And it's pretty clear, because the enemy was one. Everybody knew who the enemy was, right? Now, the reason why this has not worked in a country like India is you don't know who the enemy is, right? So everybody is so fragmented that nobody knows, okay, what am I fighting for? Because everybody's fighting their own battles. So they're not coming together on a common platform. So that's the number one problem. The second is that you have to have anger. Anger is good for change. If you look at the civil rights movement, there was anger. There was, why did suddenly Black Lives Movement come up with, George Floyd's killing? Because there was anger in the system. Anger is good, but anger can only work when people come together, and then you drive change. In the absence of either of them, it's never going to be a movement. When the Gandhi reason he was able to get 350 million people together was, he said, oh, I know my enemy is the British. That's it. If you have 100 enemies, then you don't know whom you're fighting. Or in India's case, everybody says, oh, the system is a problem. If the system is a problem, you can never change it. It's just too complex, right? So the art is to get people together and have a simple message so that people can come together and fight for driving change. And that's the art. That's what Martin Luther King does. That's what visionary leaders like Gandhi do. They know how to simplify a very complex thing to get people to rally around a common cause.
So we're all talking about systematic change with this neurodiversity movement and what
Yes.
one said about the schools, but you're
Yes.
saying that's just the beginning.
No, I'm saying systematic change is the final outcome.
Okay.
But as I said, if you can't if you're not able to define it in simple terms, you will not get million people to rally around it. It's not possible, because it's just too complex for people to understand. So the art is to get people together for a simple message. But of course, the problem you're solving is incredibly complex, right? So let me give you an example from Gandhi's Salt March. So people said, why did he do a salt march? I don't know if you know the history. He said he got 350 million people together with a simple message. He said, we will not pay tax on salt. Salt is a basic human right. And so everybody said, why did he pick up salt? And he said, salt is one thing that all 350 million people use. So you have to get a topic which touches everybody. But if you say, I am autistic, I am black autistic, I am black blind autistic, then that's too narrow a scope to get people together. It will not work. It will work for that individual, but not for the collective movement. For building movements, you have to have something which is broad, so you can get more people included in driving change.
I think there's another piece to it, though, which I think you're probably very involved in. I've done a lot of research on neurodiversity and unemployment, and
Yes.
I know that both Special Eastern and
Yes. SAP.
SAP and I think one of the issues is that people tend to be most prejudiced when they don't know who the other people are.
Yes.
And so that, as I think, I mean, this is just one of many levels. I agree with you that it's very complex, but I think as there's many more companies becoming involved in the idea that neurodiverse employees can be incredibly valuable employees. In fact, they can be more productive than what we would call the neurotypical employee. As people start to work together, as businesses start to include people like that, then there might start being the experience of, well, hey, wait a minute, this is a person, this is a real person. He actually has something to contribute to our team. And so I think there are all kinds of levels where this is going to happen. And I think that the level of some of what you're doing is a critical level.
Yeah.
So Bob, do you have any closing remarks, and anyone else could say whatever you want about this topic or anything else? And before
The
we,
only thing I would add to say is that what Dr. King did was he listened to what the populace wanted. And after he heard what people had to say, he put it into a real practice and followed that. But he kept it non-violently. But he listened and he followed, like Farouk here is saying that Gandhi did.
Feroz,
Gandhi
Feroz,
did that.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I'm sorry, how
Of
you
course.
say the name?
Feroz,
Feroz.
Broke.
Rose. Okay.
Feroz. That's
Rose.
a tongue twister.
Well,
Yes.
I'm from
yes,
Mississippi and I have a hard time just pronouncing things, period. But thank you. Thanks a lot, Rob.
Can I let you know that
A quick question for Bob before you go, before we all go. Do you think the voting, when I think of the civil rights movement, I think of voting as the key issue that was, as Feroz would say, universal. Do you think that was part of why it worked in terms of voting?
Yes, we had, in my hometown, there were, let's say there were 5,000 black folk and only 100 were registered to vote. You know, so people were pushing against not being able to vote. And that was a movement that was something that brought us all together. We wanted to have the same rights that that white folk here in the South had. So we wanted to end Jim Crow. I couldn't, well, that's a whole nother topic. But yeah, we wanted to end the Jim Crow South. So voting was very important.
And Marion, you wanted to say something?
yes, I wanted to let you know that Wen is in the participants. He did. He
Okay.
was not
Oh,
in, so I
thank
sent
you.
messages.
Oh.
And, yeah.
good. Let me see if I can find him.
Okay.
Aha, okay. Good job. Good job, Marion. Thank you so much. Okay, now he should be with us. Steve, do you want to, I feel like I'm so glad that should be on board now.
Yeah, there he is.
Okay.
Thank you. So sorry, I have been listening in the background.
Good, good.
Okay, all right.
So Wen, since you have the floor and we're doing some closing remarks, and maybe on what, anything that we've talked about, you want to just
Just
go for it.
massive agreement in coming together as one, in acceptance of difference and letting those differences not divide, but bring us together. That's what the neurodiversity, and it is a movement, is all about. And we have individuals across the world doing just that. Whether there'll be one person that might unite us, somebody like, Greta is doing a brilliant job with climate change and so on. There just has to be that coming together as an echo of everything everybody has said. And I've been really thrilled just watching. It was interesting being a participant rather than a panelist, because you get to see the individual on the whole screen when each time person is speaking. And yeah, and I felt privileged to listen to you, Bob, as well. Thank you so much for taking part. I felt right chuffed.
I'd like to make a point on what Bob said, though, because I think there's something to be learned from, for us as well. And that is I have no idea how many people there are who who are autistic, who come into all these different categories that we're talking about in terms of neurodiversity. But if all of us who are over 18 and in this country anyway, voted and put some pressure for inclusivity to be more part of schools, to be more part of textbooks, to be more part of work employment, to be more part of things, we could have some power. And I have a strong feeling that probably there isn't that kind of use of personal power brought together. And we certainly could use it. I know for this one kid that I've been involved with, this teenager, there were 180,000 names on that petition. Many of them were people who are autistic. If all of them voted and put pressure to see inclusion in the school systems, you see what I mean? We have to use the power we have.
I think you're bringing up the key question is how. you know, how do we get systematic change? And Feroz put it beautifully. It's not enough to just say we need systematic change. You know, we need that element, that universal element, the salt, you know, what the enemy, the something in education, say if we want to focus on education, the question is how, and I'm not expecting an answer, but if we bring that question up, there might be somebody who could, you know, focus on that or have us focus on that.
So I'll maybe add one point to that, Rob, and I'll agree with what Masha just said. The way we've been trying to change the narrative in India is through voting. And let me explain how we are
Wait, I
trying
didn't
to
miss
do
that
it.
word. Is through what?
It's through voting. It's through voting, right?
Voting.
What?
Vote.
Voting. Voting.
Voting.
Voting.
Spell it.
Is it voting?
Voting.
Oh, voting. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, I want to understand every word you say. Go ahead.
Sounds like a Mississippian to me.
So here is simple data. We said that if you look at the World Health Organization data, 15% of the world's population has some disability or the other. Okay, that's the WHO numbers. Every person with disability affects at least 4 people. For example, my son is autistic. It affects me, it affects my wife, it affects my in-laws who live with me. So it affects 4 people directly, and I'm not even talking about indirectly. So technically, 60% of the world's population is affected directly by people with disabilities. So they have a voice.
Yeah.
They have, and these are the 60% that should always vote for progressive, disability-friendly policies and people who support that. It's pretty simple. The maths is there, but the problem is most people don't think that way. They mostly assume they don't have the power because they're only looking at one small section, and that will not change the needle. As I said, if you look at the autism community, then it's only 1%. But if I look at the disability community, well, that's 15%. And then if you expand it to 4 times, that's 60%. Then you have strength. Then you have the numbers to change the narrative.
So I'm going to let Steve have the last word here.
Okay, great discussion, and I echo what is being said, the really important things that are being said from all of us, Bob, Wen, Marsha, Rose, Marion, and you too. Don't forget about Rob up there, who's brought us all together. And really, it's about working together. That's the key word, together. And working with each other, just like we work with the characteristics of autism in a strength-based approach, as opposed to working against each other, which is what Feroz so eloquently has been talking about, what we shouldn't be doing. And Feroz has spent a lot of time talking about what we should do, and that is working together.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful summary. And I see we don't have many questions. They agree with most of what we're saying. I think, why don't we end it here? Unless Marion, has a burning question from one of the participants, but I think I just want to, I had no idea how this was going to go, but I'm fulfilled with knowledge and
Thank you.
excitement I didn't have before this discussion. I don't know about you guys, but I personally thank everybody, and I hope we can do this again and continue the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob, for inviting us. And such an honor to meet all of you, Bob and Marcia and Wen and Stefan and Marion.
Yeah, Feroz,
Such a delight.
again.
Good to see you, my friend.
Oh,
Good
it's
to
an
see
honor
you.
having you here.
Thank you.